Hello everyone, good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the talk by MIT Club of Northern California. Tonight we have an excellent distinguished speaker, but before we introduce him, I hope you enjoy the sandwiches and cookies. We learned to make those ourselves by watching one of Sal's videos. Just kidding, we're from Subway.
Yeah.
But let me read a bio for Sal. Sal is a social entrepreneur who has become an internet sensation and inspiration for his fun and highly effective educational videos on YouTube. Every month, more than 100,000 students, both young and old, across the globe uses over 1,300 free videos to learn about arithmetics, finance, chemistry, to vector calculus. He founded the Khan Academy, which was recently covered on CNN, PBS News, NPR, San Francisco Chronicle, and ABC Nightline. His mission is nothing short of creating a free and world-class virtual school for anyone in the world. He will speak about his experience starting the academy and the massively transformational changes in learning and teaching, and that he thinks are inevitable in the next 5 to 10 years. Sal graduated from MIT in 1998 with computer science and math degrees and received his MBA from Harvard Business School. He left his day job as a hedge fund analyst in 2009 to dedicate full-time to his nonprofit academy. And we're delighted and honored to have this distinguished speaker tonight, an emerging giant in the online education space, a world-class educator, a dynamic communicator, and a selfless good doer. Salman.
I don't know, can y'all hear me? I'd prefer to just like be closer to y'all than. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah. Okay, cool. So just like Ed said, I'm Sal, the founder and faculty of the Khan Academy. This is and what we and I really want to make this, we're a bunch of I think this will be a fun conversation. I don't want this to be like me at the PowerPoint for the whole hour. So I really want y'all to interrupt me, raise your hand, ask me questions, and we can take this wherever we want to go, because there's really a couple of different conversations we can have, and maybe we can have them all. So for those of y'all, how many of y'all have watched a Khan Academy video or? Okay, so that's pretty good cover. Okay, so just so you know what it is, and actually maybe to get a sense of the growth, Ed said 100,000, and when he first asked me to do this, it was 100,000. Now it's 200,000 unique students a month, and it's only been like 2 months. So it is the fastest growing open course effort, and it's now it actually passed up. I'm not I'm a little competitive. It passed up MIT recently in terms of being the most used. It's getting about 60 or 70,000 video views a day. It has about close to 16 million views on YouTube. So it's and one of the things we can talk about is maybe why, and it might be something about the content, how it's delivered and whatnot. We can talk about all of that. But this is the site, just so for those of y'all who've never seen it, and we can also debate my user interface skills for just putting all 1,400 links on one page. But those are the videos, and if you click on a random video, if you want a review of eigenvectors and eigenspaces, you can click there, and we can let it load up or whatever. But that's the Khan Academy, and what I want to do. So that's sense what the videos look like. Is there sound? Well, it's not that the sound isn't different than what you're hearing right now. You see this and you hear my voice, and you don't see me. So this will give you a flavor for the form factor, and that could be a conversation we could have about why this is an interesting form factor or why I did it and all of that type of thing. But what I'm going to focus on, because I think most people are familiar with the video libraries, it has this reach, it's gotten popular, it's growing 10 or 15% a month at this point. But I want to talk about kind of the bigger vision. Ed had talked about this idea of starting a virtual school for the world, and obviously, videos are a start. They're kind of the lecture part of a school, but a real school's got to be more than just more than just video. You have to have some interaction with other people. You have to have practice. You have to have assessment. You have to have data and all of these things. So that's what I want to talk about. And we can. And I'm genuinely open to ideas because this is kind of a work in progress. Some of it is starting to be built. Hopefully, over the next few months, it'll be built in a much bigger way. Some volunteers have come out of the woodwork very recently to kind of supercharge some of these efforts. So it's exciting times. So let me get the presentation up. So, a good number of y'all saw the videos. How many of y'all saw the web application on the site? Okay, so that's a much lower penetration rate. So just so y'all know a little bit of the history, and I'm happy to go into this as much as you want, but I started doing this remotely tutoring cousins. I was in Boston, my cousins were in New Orleans, and she was having trouble with units, and I said, hey, let's, after your school, my work, let's get together virtually. We'll use Yahoo Doodle, it'll be a shared notepad that we can each see what each other's writing. I got her a little Wacom pen tablet. I had one for myself, and we just do conference calls. And that's how I started. Then she started doing really well. Then I started tutoring her brothers, other cousins, and then there are a couple of things happened. And I usually go straight to the videos because that's what it's known for. But being kind of a computer science geek, I thought I didn't even think of doing the videos at first. I said, hey, you know what? I'm gonna write soft because I would give them these little lectures. And then I would say, but I would just point them to random websites. Say, hey, there's a cool applet on that website over there. Why don't you try it out and tell me tomorrow whether you understood whether you're able to do those exercises, or use that website over there. And I just got really frustrated. This piecemeal, website here, website there says I'm going to write a couple of JavaScript little things that'll generate problems for them. So it's not like just 10 problems that it can make. Come up with some random numbers and give them as many problems as they need. So I made a bunch of these modules. I'll show you what the modules look like. Something like that. This is what a module. This is like a multiplying decimals module, and we can go into as much depth on these as you want. But I started making these little JavaScript modules for them, and it was starting really where she was at units and basic algebra and adding and subtracting negative numbers and basic linear equations. And then I said, but gee, I don't trust, I say, hey, Nadia, did you do the problems? How many did you do? And she's like, oh, yeah, I did them. I was like, how many? Oh, I did a couple. And I did. So I was like, I'm going to put a database behind this thing. So I put a database behind it so I could keep track of when she did the problem, how long it was taking her, how many times was she doing, how frequently was she getting one right or one wrong. Then, I started making the module. So each, on that first slide right there, each of these circles is a module. And literally the first module, this was a very organic process. It was really just me working with my cousins and iterating and saying, hey, it would be nice to have the data. And then I started making, like modules here, one off, and I would at first just point them to it. And then after a while, I was like, well, there's some kind of dependency here because, Nadia got that, but she needs help with that. So let me make a little, to fill in that gap, let me make another module. And then after a while, I got tired of having to assign the modules. So I said, well, it should automatically assign the modules because there's this, once she gets 10 in a row in this, she's ready for this, this, and this. And so I kind of created this internal dependency in the little app to do this. And I said, well, this is kind of a neat graph. This is what I was using just to keep track of the modules. I should just expose this to the students so they know what's going on. So this is the app, and this started well before I made the first video. But it's kind of like the secret of the Khan Academy, so you're getting a little tidbit. But I think it's also the future on a lot of levels. So this right here, this is literally level 1 addition. So it's literally 1 plus 1. And if you go to the website, there's literally a video on adding on 1 plus 1. And at first, it's almost a joke that I made the video on adding 1 plus 1. But the whole idea behind it, besides being cute, is to give people the notion that look, no matter how basic your skills, you can go to the site and you will find something that fits your need, and the idea that you can, when you see 1 plus 1 on the same page as vector calculus, or on the same, you're like, gee, there's just like I just have to step through that thing and I can get to vector calculus. There's not some mysterious, and it's the same dude who's going to take me through the whole darn, my kindergarten teacher is teaching me vector calculus. What's more? So you get 10 in a row, and once this was made, then it started to make, this became what a lot of people in education talk about, differentiated learning with data and all of that. But it kind of made me pause and say, well, this is working for my cousins. But there was actually one piece that was missing, and that was kind of I still had to do, when I first started it, I thought, oh, it randomly generated these problems, and pick random numbers here, and then when you click hint, it would show you the exact steps for that problem. And I was like, oh, that's all you need to learn how to do a problem. You just need the exact steps for that exact problem. This will work for my cousins. But it didn't. I mean, it would help them if they kind of knew how to multiply decimals already, but it didn't kind of get them over that hurdle. I still had to do that one-on-one session with them remotely, and that became hard to scale. And literally another buddy from MIT, we were at dinner, he's like, why don't you make YouTube videos? Why don't the thing that you do with your cousins, why don't you just record that on YouTube? And I was completely dismissive of the idea at first. I was like, oh, that's so silly. I have this software. It generates problems dynamically. It's got hints. What's a YouTube video going to? He's like, well, yeah, you're right. It's probably a stupid idea. And then I went home and I was like, well, maybe there's something to it. Literally, when I kept recording videos with my, I would do the 10th lecture on negative numbers with a new cousin. I was like, Jesus. Yeah, maybe a YouTube video will make sense. So I made the first YouTube video on greatest common divisor and this and that, and then, someone else. I've said this in talks before. The immediate feedback I got from my cousins was that you are better on YouTube than you are live. and the point I think that he was trying to communicate is, it had none of the pressure of a traditional tutoring session. Did you get this? And you're staring at the person, and they're like, oh yeah, maybe I did. There's a lot, and they're giving you bad information because they didn't get it. And they feel bad pausing or repeating me, but they can do it all they want with a YouTube video, or they could go to Wikipedia, or they could, or they might be afraid of even admitting that they don't know how to, borrow or regroup or whatever, but that now they can actually review it in kind of these one-off videos. So that was it, and then other people started watching it as well and said, hey, there's something there. And on top of that, I incorporated it with this because that was the whole point in the first place, to have, if you've never seen this concept before, you at least have this outlet, these YouTube videos that you could somehow access. But before I kind of go into the depths of this, I want to, once this was built, then I kind of had this this seems to be working, but let's compare it to what goes on right now in the school system. And if you think, we're all, the whole conversation about education right now is all about the student-teacher ratios. How can we make the inner-city poor schools look a lot like the fancy rich schools? Give people computers, but no one is fundamentally questioning the model. And if you really think about the model itself, I don't want to taint your opinion before. But it's bizarre. You have this situation. We go into you go into a classroom. And you have this, you're all in a room together, and we'll talk about, what you could do if you're all in a room together, but there's no interaction. It's just like this broadcast lecture, especially once you get to the university level. But even in the classroom at, in middle school, there might be a little one question here or there, but it's fundamentally a broadcast lecture to the room. The teacher is pretty much guaranteed to lose half the students or bore half the students. And at some point they're going to switch the whole time. You do that, then you go home, the student has to go home, do their homework. They do it in a complete vacuum. They have a textbook. Every other problem might be there's a solution in the back. You don't know why you got it right or wrong, anything. A complete vacuum. If you don't have anyone to help you, if you're lucky, you might get a tutor or your parent might be able to help you. Then you go to class the next day, and there might be some type of review of homework or but really no real feedback. And the cycle repeats itself. You get another lecture. Then you go back home, you do homework in a vacuum, and this whole time you don't know what you're doing, and all. The teacher has no data, nothing. That occurs for a couple of days, and then bam, you have an assessment. And then on the assessment, some students get 80, even the students who, some students get 50%, 80%, 70%, 90%. The good students get 95%. Next concept. No one, even if you fail an exam, the class moves on. You don't know half of the subject, half of the material in that previous concept, and the class is going to move on. And you might say that failing students are bad, the A students are all right, but they still didn't know 5% of the concept. And maybe it was a careless mistake, but maybe they didn't know what happens when you take something to the 0th power. Maybe they didn't know exactly what a fractional exponent was, that one problem on the exam with the fractional exponent. And that A student, the one who's getting that positive label, we're a bunch of, when they go to calculus and they see that what are they going to do? They're not going to get 95%, they're going to get 90% because they're going to miss that and another concept. And then when they go on, and that's not even to mention about the 50%, right? So you have this bizarre, the first time you get assessment is when it's time to move to the next concept. There's in no way is it actionable. So if you really think about the process, it's just this huge filtering mechanism. It's just this process where we're just trying to, every step of the way, we're just knocking more and more people off. And the lucky people in this room, we were the people who happened to be lucky enough that we were assessed and filtered at the right place at the right time, and that led to us feeling really smart and going on and doing on, which is, that's the way it works. I mean, it makes you really question. We're all lucky. That's the big takeaway. So what's happening here, what I think is happening here, is that whole cycle. It's all happening. It's happening instantaneously with every interaction, right? The instruction. If you've never seen multiplying decimals before in your life, you click watch video, it pumps in from YouTube, and you can imagine, there's 1 or 2 videos right now, but you eventually have 10 videos. You're tracking whether the person watched the video. You can eventually track whether they paused or repeated where they watched it. I'll talk more about that later on, to how you can perfect the content. So they get the instruction there. Then they can do the practice. So you're getting the practice, and you get immediate feedback. You get, did I get it right or wrong? If you don't know how to do it, you get the exact steps for that problem. And then you're also getting assessment, because every time you do a problem, it's tracking everything about that. When you did it, how long it took you, how many times did you click hint, and then the paradigm here. And I literally did this just on a whim. I was like, well, how do I know if someone really knows something? I was like, it's not 90%, or it's not 95%. Just keep doing it until you get 10 in a row. 10 in a row should be the paradigm, because then, and that'll kind of enforce a certain level of discipline. I mean, people say, oh, isn't that, kind of, but no, but like when you take the SAT, you can't make those little careless mistakes. You should enforce a certain level of precision. So I just threw out 10 in a row, and it doesn't have to be 10 in a row. It could be 5 in a row, or whatever, depending on the concept. But if you think about what's happening when you enforce, is that you don't allow that 95% student to move on while not knowing that 5%, and then only get lost in the next topic. So that's the general idea. This right here is this is just another example of a module. This is slope of a line. And if you don't know how to do hint, it draws things for you. But it's just another indication of, and all of this is live. You can go right now to conexercises.appspot.com, and you can try out all of this stuff. And I encourage you, if you have friends or family members. There was even a guy at the hedge fund I worked with who was going to take the GMAT, and he was like summa cum laude from Yale. And he's like, oh, what should I use for math? I was like, you should use this. I was like, hey, but this is starting me at 1 + 1. I was just do it. Two weeks later, he's like, that was good. It's amazing how long many people haven't multiplied decimals. So that's kind of the self-paced student kind of view of the world. And we'll talk about how we can, because I still haven't given you the whole virtual school. Right now we're talking about videos, and then we've kind of automated the self-directed learning and learning at your own pace and getting assessed. But then you have to think about, well, how can you incorporate that with the human experience? You're coming into a room together to essentially learn. How can you use this technology to hypercharge that type of thing? Actually, even before I even talk about this, there's actually a very simple flipping of the classroom that I think should occur tomorrow. You don't even need any of this software, because the videos already exist. And some teachers, it wasn't my idea, a teacher in London said that he is now, and if you think, it's actually a no-brainer. I don't understand why this doesn't happen worldwide tomorrow. He is now assigning the lectures for homework, and he's having the students do homework in the classroom. There's no other technology necessary. And think about what happens there. Right now, we all gather at 7 in the morning and 10:50, ready to, and we're all with our peers, and we're looking at, and we have to sit passively and just get this broadcast lecture, and then we go off on our own and we do these problem sets in a vacuum. If you flip the model, and the lecture, as we said, it's one size fits all. I might be lost or bored. I might have gaps from the last lecture that I didn't understand, but I still have to get this exact lecture. You flip the model, you get on-demand video at home, when you're ready for it, when you're awake, when you get. It's actually, I got a letter from a student about, they actually have a good calculus teacher, but 2 rows in front of him, this really cute girl is and every day he's just trying to figure out how he can ask her out, and he missed like 2 months of calculus. and this was his only out. But that, I mean, that's another. But the I lost it. I say that's a story of another person, but that is another. We all had similar stories, I think. But we go home and we do these problem sets in a complete vacuum. We have no one to help us. But if you flip it, you can watch things at your own pace, fill in your gaps, do whatever you need, and then when you're in the classroom, you have 30 or 40 or 400 of your peers to help you, and you have the professor who can walk around and in real time see how people are doing. Before, 2 weeks before the assessment, 2 weeks before everyone gets that label placed on their head that they're a B student, which is, if you really think about it, kind of silly. And I'm not like this touchy, there are these people who are anti-grades, and it's kind of like, oh, that's touchy-feely, we should. No, I'm anti-grades because I think it's ridiculous. It's not about, it's because if you're a B student, everyone should be forced to be an A student. It's on that concept. It's silly, you'll meet many, many people, and I think this room is an exception, but you'll meet many, many people who went through algebra, algebra 2, geometry, pre-calculus, trigonometry, calculus. And when they see an algebra problem in their front of their face, they don't see it. It's just they never had mastery of anything in between. And this whole exercise of going from one hoop to the next and being an A- student the whole way is just an exercise in filtering. It's not an exercise in actually making people have tangible skills that they can do something productive with. But that, what I just described, flipping the model, that's if you have no technology. But if you have the technology, what you can do is, teacher, and there's a bunch of student names here that you can't see, I blanked them out. But this is a report that a teacher could have, and this is actually a real report, this isn't like a Photoshop version. This was done at a summer camp where they used what I showed you in the last couple slides as their math curriculum, where every student was able to work at their own pace. And the teacher walks in every day. Each column here is one of those modules that you saw on that first slide. It's one of those concepts. And each row here is a student. Green means that the student already got 10 in a row on that concept. They did it, they're cool. Purple means that they're working on it right now. That that's kind of their frontier of learning at the moment, but everything seems to be going okay. And then red means, that student's done like 50 problems. I mean, you can think of the heuristic. That student's done 50 problems. 95% of students who've done 50 problems in that module usually move on. The student has not. So some type of intervention should occur, some type of human intervention. So a teacher could look at this, and either they could eyeball it, they could say, hey, look, everyone's doing fine, but these two kids need help in level 2 division. Let everyone else work at their own pace. Let me just take these two students aside and do a very intimate, focused intervention on just those two students. Or even better, you could pair these two students up with these two students up initially and see if that gets them over the hurdle. And you can actually capture the data before and after that. If I'm not there yet, but if the software is actually scheduling the interactions, you can actually see what happens before those and start to rate teachers and students and all of that type of thing, and slowly work up to the level of the teacher. So what I think should happen, and I hope that this kind of catalyzes it, is we go back to a one-room schoolhouse. We go back to a room full of people, from kindergartners all the way to anybody, and senior citizens who want to come back and learn, and they're all working at their own pace. And if you have trouble with a concept, and even if you don't know, this will know that you're having trouble with the concept. It will pair you with somebody else. And it'll know about that interaction. It'll know how good of an instructor that person was before and after. You'll rate them, whatever else. And then you can keep escalating up and up the ladder until eventually you can get by the paid teacher. So you can actually have a reality where, and obviously there's a huge aspect of actually teaching people for retention. I mean, this isn't just a way to get economics and scale. This whole mechanism, I'm a 9th grader and I'm teaching this 6th grader negative numbers. That by itself is a hugely powerful tool. I mean, I'm learning things better than I ever learned before just doing these videos. You can imagine and this whole level of maturity. I think actually if you hang out with people older and younger than yourself, you actually act more mature for a whole set of reasons. But then all of a sudden you have a model where everyone is learning. The classroom is actually an interactive experience. It's no longer a passive experience. Everyone is operating exactly at the level that they need to, and it actually scales. You can actually make it economic. You could actually have, everyone's obsessed with student-teacher ratios. But student-teacher ratios assume a model that if there's one of me and 10 of you, then we can have a conversation. If there's one of me and 20 of you, we're going to have less of a conversation. One of me and 100 of you, we're not going to have a conversation. And that's true to some degree. But here, everyone works at their own pace. Even if there's 100 students and one paid tutor, because you have this interaction, I'm willing to bet that you're going to have a better interaction with that one paid teacher who can now be paid $100,000 a year instead of what teachers get paid. You're going to have a better interaction in this world with a 100-to-1 teacher-student ratio than you'll probably get in even the fanciest private schools that there are right now. This right here. This is literally like, the school, the summer program had asked about this, and I was curious myself. This was literally me just doing SQL queries in the data, every night when I went from the summer camp. But it's not like a rigorous study. But to me, it kind of speaks to the power of every student working at their own pace, and kind of throws into question the notion of our traditional notions of assessment, which I think sense are kind of are shady to begin with. So what this chart is doing, this axis right here is the days in the summer camp. So it was a 6-week program, and this is just a count of the modules completed. And this black line right here, that's the class mean, the class average. So if you say, on day 7 in this class of 30 or so students, the average student had completed 23 modules. That's what that tells us. And then, and so you can actually even see that they all started 1 plus 1, which is actually an interesting idea because we started another group not at 1 plus 1, and some subset of the students always got stuck. They just never moved on. Even though we started them at 5th grade and they were 7th graders, some subset always got stuck. What we saw when we started everyone at 1 plus 1, no one got stuck. Which tells you that there are some smart people who have some gaps. And it never gets addressed otherwise. So you can have the best algebra teacher on the planet, and you can have an innately very intelligent kid, but if he or she just is a little foggy on multiplying decimals, there's no hope. They're just going to talk past each other, and it's just going to be a very frustrating experience. But when you start everyone at 1 plus 1, and you see it here, it's kind of a very steep curve. This is kind of the review. This was the kids just getting a 10 in a row, 10 in a row, 10 in a row, and then it starts to level out a bit, and this was kind of, you can kind of see the learning happening. But the interesting thing, or at least to me the interesting thing about this is, the green lines are standard deviation above and below that mean. And you can plot all the students here, but this student in particular, on day 5, if you did like a pre-assessment for the class, if you did an assessment right here, she only completed 12 modules. More than 1 standard deviation below the mean. So if you were in a traditional, if you were tracking students, you say, oh, she's a remedial student, she's going to hold the class back, or we have to hold the rest of the class back for her, she doesn't belong in here, all of that. And you would put a big label on her forehead, you're never going to be an engineer, all of these things are going to be placed on it, which does, and it actually does happen at around 6th or 7th grade. That is when these labels, these careers get ruled out for students. But because she was able to spend a little, and I was curious, I was like, what happened to her? And I could go into the data, and I could see exactly what she was doing. She was spending more time than everyone else on adding and subtracting negative numbers. And just to understand this chart right here, each bar, this is the first problem she did. Red is wrong, blue is right. And the height is how long it took her. So, this is just from the data of the interactions. And so you can see she got a couple of questions wrong, then she maybe guessed one right, then you have this big long time. She actually watched the video here. I looked at the video log. She watched the video here. Then she got a couple more right, but then she still got a few wrong. So once again, in a traditional classroom, she would have been said, oh, at this point, you are an A student. You got 9 out of 10 right, or you got 19 out of 20 right. You're an A student. But no, it forced her to keep going. A couple more right, 1 wrong. Then finally, she got 10 in a row. And you can actually see that she also got faster on it. So there's a whole other element of speed, which doesn't matter on some standardized tests. But once she got through that, once she was able to just kind of remediate herself and really build a strong foundation, she just raced ahead. This was just in 6 weeks. She went from being, I think, the 2nd to worst student in the class, if you want to measure that way, to the 2nd or 3rd best. All the students on our chart here in just 6 weeks. So it makes you question, if you did an assessment here, and I show that because she literally raced through level 3 linear equations, which is like 2x plus 7 is equal to negative 3x minus 4. It's like, and she just thought it was intuitive after doing maybe level 2. She just raced. If you saw that student, you say, oh, she's gifted. She's destined to be an engineer. She's give her. So it makes you really question. And we were just the lucky kids that got assessed at the right time and got all the positive feedback. And we were assessed at that point, and people get. But there's probably a lot of people who might have been able to eat our lunch eventually, who got kicked off. So this, I show this. This is data from YouTube, and it's. I think everything I talked about before is how do you make sure a student learns properly, and how do you make sure that their foundation is built, and how do you use that data to optimize the actual physical interactions. But I show this to kind of show that there's another dimension of perfecting the actual content. So this is data that YouTube gives me. They call this audience attention, and what they do is they measure the drop-off rate off of a YouTube video relative to the average YouTube video of that length. So let's say the average YouTube video at minute 3 has lost 40% of its audience. That's just a natural drop-off rate, right? If I've lost at minute 3, if I've lost 40% of my audience, I'll be hugging the line right there. If I've only lost 20% of my audience, I'll be above average. So that's what they're measuring there. But you can imagine, and actually I've seen a few of my videos where this curve does this. It just drops off. And I can go to that exact minute in the video and say, oh, I said orthogonality, and I never defined orthogonality. And I could either re-record the video, I could put a little bubble there where you can get more information, or just, you're getting real data that allows you to actually iterate and perfect on what you're producing. And you can imagine 2 dimensions. This is attention. You can also have efficacy if you couple it with the actual exercise, and you keep iterating on it until you have kind of a gem of a video. And you can even have multiple people's videos, see what's better for different people. This all exists in like Netflix. There's no reason why it shouldn't exist in education. So this right here, this is kind of the big picture. I'm talking about like a virtual school for the world. This is what I think it's going to be, and I'm open to any ideas or any kind of nuanced parts of it. But you have your video library. That's kind of the low-hanging fruit. It's the first line of instruction. You can pause it and repeat it. One thing, I spoke to a journal of higher education recently, and sometimes I'm very diplomatic. I realize I don't want to rock too many boats. But I was in like a quirky mood, and I hadn't eaten for a long time. People who know about my eating habits know that I often don't eat for long periods of time. But I just went off. I was like, I challenge you. Because this is a journal read by like professors and educators. I was like, why does a 300-person lecture even exist anymore? Like, in what way? Like, just tell me one way that is better than on-demand video. Like, this is just like this, and I'm happy for any of y'all to prove, but there's no, it's this broadcast lecture to a room of people at a certain amount of time that's 90 minutes long. People have gaps in it. The professor sees blank faces. It's just this all around, I think the only reason it exists is because people associate it with a college experience. People expect when I pay $30,000 or $40,000, I should get this. That's the only, in my mind, why it exists. With on-demand video, you can pause, repeat it. The producer can create, can get data on what's working, what's not. You can get your best professors to produce the best content and keep iterating and making it better and better. People can fill in their gaps. So that's what the video library is all about. Then you have the web applications. You saw one of them, but there's actually another one, and there's some gentlemen in the back of the room who started working on it. There's a whole suite of web applications you can build for allowing people to learn at their own pace. What you saw was for math. We're working on something, and I'd be happy to talk about it if y'all are curious, for kind of more, fact-based knowledge, learning American history or geography, things like that. And you could even have web applications, for peer assessment, for creative writing, all sorts of things. When you actually compose things for other people to review, it becomes a whole other level, whole other game than when you're writing something for a teacher to mark up and, and say you're a B+ and then throw it away. So there's a whole suite of web applications you can build. And then on top of that, you use all of that data to actually facilitate peer-to-peer interactions. And I kind of hinted at that in the classroom, but there's no reason why it just has to be limited to the classroom. If I'm having trouble with quantum mechanics and the best instructor for quantum mechanics is in Mexico City, and we're both free at 4 p.m. Eastern time, no reason that we can't set up an interaction with a pen tablet, and the way I used to do with my cousin Nadia, and have an interaction, and even better, record that interaction so that other people in the future can use it. I rate them based on how they were. They can even rate me how I was as a student, and then the system knows what I did before and after that interaction. So it actually knows whether it was a statistically significant intervention in some way. So this is the big picture. You can just keep getting the data and iterating and iterating and iterating it to make it a better solution. So that's kind of the master plan. So, any questions or yeah.
I know you've got this initial focus of K through 12 and math and whatnot.
Sorry, we can't hear the question.
Okay, so one of the things you said really struck me as an educator, which is your comment about everyone should be forced to be an A student.
Right.
So if you think about, this is an org change exercise with a lot of unwilling institutions trying to get them to change.
Yeah.
It seems to me that this idea, just this one idea, would be very powerful to take into professional certification.
Right.
Say nursing degrees.
Right.
Where you're not going to be a nurse
Right.
until you achieve this level of competency in the exam. In other words,
Right.
take a profession where this idea that everybody does have to be an A student
Right.
in order to have a career, and get them to buy into this model and maybe get the resources from that sort of problem or that sort of field
Right.
to test these ideas out and to show how they work or to refine the implementation
Yeah.
or whatever.
Well, I think it exists in professional development because people say, look, if you're a nurse and you don't know this, people are going to die, and so they do enforce that. Doctors, nurses, and police. That exists, but it isn't. We could do studies, but I think it's almost intuitive that if we go back to kind of the someone who has real mastery of algebra is going to be way more powerful than someone who has B- student level of understanding of algebra through differential equations. They're never going to be able to apply any of it, as opposed to I've worked at when I was working at a hedge fund. There was once a CFO who said I was like, oh, what's your incremental gross margin? He's like, oh, we don't divulge that. I was like, well, you just gave it to me. You told me your gross profit in 2 periods and how many units you sold in 2 periods. That's your and literally everyone in the room was like, oh my God, this is some kind of rocket science. That is algebra 1. That is algebra 1. And no one in the room. There are MBAs, there were PhDs in the room. They're very smart people, but no one could recognize. And that is a failure. And these are the successful people in our education system. So if people need to. I mean, if we had real mastery of algebra, the world would be a different place. All the calculus and all of that other stuff would just be, you know, for fun. But it's not. So I mean, you know, I don't even think it has to be tested. If people really understood algebra, that's going to be way better than people, you know, halfway understanding algebra and then moving on to other things. Yeah.
Question about the peer-to-peer interaction. So, do you see that happening now? Actually, if you have 16 million views on YouTube, I imagine there's comments and is there comment moderation happening?
Yeah. So there's no moderation. So if you look at, y'all can go home and look at some of the not debates or even some of the commentary on the YouTube videos are like what teachers would dream of having in their classroom. Like someone says, hey, you know, this was a great video, but I don't quite get what Sal did at minute 2:34. There's a little link in YouTube. You can go right back to that little point in the video. And then other people will come along and say, oh, you just have to watch that other video, and he explains that in depth. Or here's another page, you could watch it. Or they'll actually just explain it right there. And this is just on a simple message board. So it definitely already exists, and it's literally just, there's a lot of people, I get at least 5 emails a day asking for a better kind of community to tap into this, and I've just been waiting to kind of do it right. But it's there. And I mean, people love to help each other, and they just don't have a good way of doing it right now.
I have children in the first grade and fourth grade, and what would you suggest I do with this?
First through fourth?
First and fourth.
So, and this is, it's not scientific. I've tried out the app with different aged kids. Like the 1+1, it is 1+1, but it doesn't have like dancing bears. And no, I hope to eventually have dancing. I mean, everyone likes dancing. You don't need to be a kindergartner, but I found like kindergarten, I've seen some precocious second or third graders get into it. Like they don't need the dancing bears and the music and all of that type of thing. So your fourth grader, I think, could be ready for this. The videos, I've seen very young kids like them. They like I don't know what they like about it. They like the black background and the colors, and they respond to the videos. I've seen 3 or 4 year olds. It holds their attention. I don't know if they're retaining anything. So you might want to start with the videos for your younger student, and then, but the fourth grader, I think, is ready for the app.
I think the younger kid goes straight to the YouTube.
Yeah, I think so, and you might want to watch it with them and kind of, some people told me that they watch a couple of videos a night with their kid and just kind of replace the bedtime story, and why not?
So, are your videos in your system a little too big for one laptop per child?
So, the question is your video in your system a little too big for one laptop per child? And I guess there's a couple of, in terms of just
getting any of that content into there, because right now I think they're just doing like textbook kind of format, right?
Yeah. So the question is it too big for kind of getting the content into one laptop per child? And I mean, the easy answer is no. I mean, when I first saw one laptop per child, this was before Khan Academy was really well thought out. I was like, gee, what are they going to do on that one laptop per child? They're going to use it, and there's examples of people using it for lights and things, as opposed, for a computer. So I think it could be used tomorrow on one laptop per child. If there were.
But do they have enough drive space and things like that? A lot of
So-
them don't have network connectivity.
Yeah, so the raw videos, they're going to be on iTunes U soon. So I just talked to the Apple people and I handed them the disc that had all the raw videos. So then and it was like 40 gigs. And I think if you took the flash versions, it's 10 megabytes. It's like 14 gigs. So I don't know how big the hard drives are, those, but soon they're going to be able to store all.
Well, that should be something you should look into, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a big deal, right?
No, I would love to. If they called me up, I'd say yeah.
Well,
Yeah. No. Hopefully they will. Yeah. No, I'd love to. I'd love to. And we could have another talk about. One thing I'm talking to a couple of foundations, and what I'm telling you is one laptop per child would be awesome if there's the resources, but you don't necessarily need one laptop per child. You get like some refurbished $200 PC, put it in the village. Now all of a sudden you can have asynchronous learning, which is what these village kids need because they have to take off for the harvest. They have a whole spectrum. Some of them can't read. Some of them, have a pretty reasonable proficiency. And that $200 that $200 refurbished PC, instead of being one per student, you have 20 students per day working on it, each half an hour a day doing this type of thing. And then as a foundation, for the first time in like the history of philanthropic giving, you'd actually have real data on what's happening in real time on the actual utilization of your assets, where students are, how they're performing. And then in terms of the actual cost, it's, a $200 PC will last 4 years, so it's $50 a year, and you're educating 20 students. That's $2.50 per student per year for an education which is competitive with anywhere in the third world. It's cheaper than pencil and paper. So I think that's what should be the model, if, you know. But if they get a laptop, that's even better. Yeah. Oh, in the back, yeah.
I think you said you do all the videos and lectures yourself.
Right.
You're the person on screen. How long does it take you to put together a module? And I mean, there's some topic areas. Surely you don't know all of it.
Oh, no, I know. So the module, so the video, if it's like a work, like, you know, there's probably people emailing me right now, like some algebra. I think I'm inadvertently doing some kids' homework for them. But those type of things where it's just like an algebra problem, someone emails it to me, it's like, oh, you know what, I haven't done that exact problem before. Let me just do it. That's literally, you know, the 10 minutes of the video plus 5 minutes to upload to you. It's a very small amount of time. If you saw that first screen, I started doing world history videos.
Yeah.
Those take a lot of.
Well, like, what do you mean by a lot?
So when I started on the French Revolution, I spent like a week doing nothing but reading on the French Revolution, and like I literally just took time off and I like steeped myself in the French Revolution. Because, you know, I think we've all found this when we were going to school, is that when you're in the midst of a class, you really are an expert for that short period of time until the exam, and then you are an expert, and then it all goes away. That short period of time, you can talk to any academic anywhere in the world, and you know all of the details and the nuances and everything. So, you know, about a week of hard studying, it's fun studying, right? It's not for an exam, it's for me, and I get to make YouTube videos. So I'll do that, and then I'll start making the videos, and then I could probably produce maybe 2 or 3 videos a day. Once I have kind of the big picture and I understand the major pieces and I have a kind of a sense of, and you know, if you watch those videos, it's literally I cut and paste a bunch of images and maps from Wikipedia, and then I just explain them. I mean, I'm a big map person, so I need that. But yeah, okay, in the back.
Is the software that you use to do things like draw perfectly straight lines and do an erasure something you can buy off the shelf at Fry's, or did you design that all yourself?
No, although some people have offered to pay for it, but I didn't build it. So and actually I don't. So all I use is I started off using Microsoft Paint. As I made the background black, and I used this thing called Screen Video Recorder 2, which is like this shareware, freeware, $20 screen capture software. That's what I started. The first probably 400 or 500 videos were done like that. Then someone just sent me a Camtasia license. They're like, "This is great, but you need a better screen capture." So I started using Camtasia, and then I used Smooth Draw 2, which is you know, pressure sensitive, so it actually looks like I'm writing with a pen as opposed to Microsoft Paint. But it's all, you know, you could get set up for $200 at home with exactly what I have. It's all, you know, found stuff. There's probably better stuff out there. Like what I'm using right now, I can't draw a straight line. With Microsoft Paint, I could, but this doesn't have a line tool. So, yeah.
In line with your idea of this as entertainment, so replacing bedtime stories, I think there's a niche for retirees. For example, I know any number of people who first thing in the morning do 3 crosswords and a Sudoku.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then they go to their fully volunteer stand or to play golf or whatever.
And Sudoku is pointless. No, I know. I mean, my mother-in-law does love Sudoku. Oh, you can learn algebra. That's so much better. I have gotten letters from retirees saying that they've started doing it instead of Sudoku, and the big, you know, other than, you know, keeping them sharp and, you know, remember it, they're now connecting with their grandkids. They're like becoming their grandkids' tutor, and this is a whole level of connection that they never could have before. So there is something, and there's, you know, and not the retirees. There's a lot of homeschooling parents who are like, now I can kind of, you know, I don't tap. I think there's a lot of homeschoolers who are doing great until about algebra, and then they're like, what do I do next? And this is kind of helping them out. But yeah, there's actually a lot of there's a lot of people who have surprised me. There's a lot of military people, roughly my age, who are going back to college. Who there's no, if you think about it, if you're like in your mid-30s and you want to go back to college, and the first thing you're going to see when you go to college is college algebra, and there's going to be an assessment exam. There's nothing out there for you. There's no, like, I mean, you're helpless, and this is the only thing that's out there. And they're like eternally thankful that they can relearn arithmetic and algebra and all these things that they haven't seen for 20 years. So yeah, it's surprising.
So I have an age grader, and my question is, would you say that the videos sometimes could replace going back to the textbook when they get stuck, or, you know?
Yeah, so the question, and this is...
Because the textbooks...
Oh, and don't get me started about textbooks. No, I will get started about textbooks. So the question was, I have an 8th grader, you think the videos can replace the textbook? And let's think about what a textbook is. There's 2 things in a textbook. There's, you know, something that claims to be some form of explanation, right? That 2 pages of text on, you know, so, and then it's exercises. right? And there's like 50 problems, and a couple of, and they give you the answer. I guarantee you on-demand video, whether it's Khan Academy or anybody, is going to be better than that prose or whatever you want to call it that's trying to explain the concept. And it's usually explained more for peer review, more for the other textbook authors saying, oh, yes, he did it rigorously, that's excellent, as opposed for the 8th grader who wants, exactly. No, 99, I think the people in this room are the small subset of people who could actually read a textbook. And that's what allowed us to probably get where we got, because we could actually consume that information, but most people don't. So on-demand video is better than that. And from an exercise point of view, the textbook company doesn't know who's doing what exercise when, who's watching what's actually being effective. They're not getting real-time data. That stuff you can argue what the module should look like, but something like that is going to be infinitely better, especially if you can tweak it and get data on what's working, what are people using. For all we know, textbook publishers, half of those problems are never touched by anybody. But they're in there, and kids are getting hernias carrying those problems around. And no. So yes, the answer is I think the textbooks need to go on a lot of levels.
So for like world history, what kind of problems do you put out there so you can write your assessment?
Yeah, so the question is for world history, what kind of problems can you put out there? So right now, so for like what I showed you, that those modules, that's good for something that can be like templatized, that you can, math, you could even do some like physics problems like that, like the core problems. You could do some types of chemistry, maybe genetics. But what about, what were the causes of the Civil War? Or what
not just that, with like analysis of like a complex issue,
Oh yeah. So there's two levels of things like history. One is kind of the, what did Millard Fillmore do? There's that level, and then there's a level of, let's talk about what, the impacts of slavery today or something more nuanced. The core stuff, and that's what I'm working on with those two gentlemen back there. They just, literally I met them, Jay and Vishal at the back. We met like last week and out there. But what we're working on is we're working on, if we were studying for like a factual-based thing, we would get together in a big study group and, write flashcards for each other and then quiz each other on each other's questions. And so what we're working on is, kind of a world's, if for American history, you put the whole curriculum there. And then if you say, I'm going to write a question on the antebellum period. You click antebellum, you write a question, you can embed a video, image, whatever you want. Once you feel good about it, you put the correct choice, incorrect choice as explanation. Once you feel good about it, you publish it. If I'm the first person to see your question, I'll say, hey, warning, this is an untested question, all of that stuff, but you should try it out. I do the question, I rate it on quality, difficulty, and importance, and then you start building this library of questions with metadata around it. And then you can imagine that you're collecting data on people who knew this question, didn't know that question, so you can quantitatively say what's easier, what's harder. And then, there's all sorts of ways you can consume the question. You can imagine a teacher, because you're getting all of this data, right? You know exactly how long it takes for a certain type of student to complete a question, whether they get it right or wrong. You can imagine a history teacher, once you have this huge, data, this huge library of questions, like, you know what, I want to administer an exam to my history students tomorrow. I'm going to bring them in the computer lab. I want 50 questions, and I don't want more than a 95% chance that more than 2 people aren't going to finish that exam. And we'll have all of the data, because it'll know for that level of student how long it'll take them. It'll be able to do the statistical modeling, and then bam, they'll get it, and it'll be instantly graded, and you'll get the data, and it'll go into and they can have their students also write. So that's for like the core, and you can do that for anything. You can do that even for kind of more nuanced math problem stuff that's not hard to templatize. The more nuanced stuff, that's an open question. I'm open to ideas. I think there's things, a peer review of essays. Or you could argue, you could have, argue through essays and have people vote on whose argument is. There's all sorts of things you can do. That's a whole other, but that hasn't been, foreign language. I was thinking, you have a 15-month-old, Skype exists. Like, the best foreign language, I'm going to have him chat for half an hour a week with somebody in Mexico City, Dubai, Hong Kong, and half an hour a week, and they'll just chat, he'll speak in English, That's foreign language. Like I think there's some very simple things with found technology right now that could solve some of these problems. That would be immersion as opposed to rote foreign language learning. Oh yeah.
Very curious to hear your thoughts about the Texas Board of Education.
Which one of education?
So have you heard about the Texas Board of Education?
Oh, the Texas Board of
They're trying to
Education.
rewrite the textbooks,
Yes.
especially around American history, and wondering
Yes.
whether that sort of made you rethink about your mission with Khan Academy.
Oh yeah. No, that's interesting. So I have an interesting story. So he's asking about the Texas Board of Education, they're rewriting American history and all that. Well, from a personal level, that's the power of this thing. Like, I can all of a sudden get it. So I do every now and then I go on Google blog search and I see who's using these Khan Academy videos. And obviously it's a lot of homeschoolers and all that. but actually a white supremacy group loves the Khan Academy. and you know, because they're like, this is quality instruction, our kids aren't getting it, this is the only way that they're going to be able to compete with the Asians and the Jews and the, you know, but what's happening, if you, I mean, it's fascinating. There's no way that they could have gotten me to, you know, teach their, or they would have let me get into their house and teach their kid, but because they recognize that this is better than what they're getting in the school, I'm able to get into those kids' heads, which would have never, ever, and I mean, you can debate whether that's a good thing. but I think that whole Texas thing, I think it's a non-issue. I think with the internet and all of that, I think these people can debate night and day over what should be in the textbook. No one's going to care at the end of the day. It's because they're going to get information from other sources. I think. I mean, the reality is most of the kids aren't learning what they're trying to put in the curriculum. So who cares?
Are you able to, different people learn in different ways.
Right.
And so, for example, some people might learn with examples and other people want to learn more deductively. Can you identify the ways that people learn and then adjust the instruction to match what's best for them?
Yeah, so the question was, can you adjust to, you know, deductive learners versus people who need examples? You know, we could. I don't do it yet. I mean, I don't think that it's already done and all of that. But no, it definitely could be done, and that's the other value of this. You know, there's, you know, even in the, some people said, oh, are you teaching it this new way with regrouping? Are you teaching the old way with borrowing? Are you teaching the abstract manipulative way? Are you teaching the rote? I was like, let's do both. Let's do both, and people can pick and choose what they want or do both. There's not, you know, in a traditional classroom, you have to make these decisions because you have a scarce amount of time, scarce amount of resources. You have to say, teach it this way or that way. But here, just teach it both ways. Teach it the deductive way, and then do a ton of examples because that's the way most people enjoy it. There's nothing to stop you from doing it.
So I saw the graph earlier where you show how you get from addition 1 all the way through.
Right.
And that's how the brain works to build on top of foundations.
Right.
And you can extend that even further by anything that's factual, taking history or geography. By taking the Wikipedia graph of links, for example, you could imagine after you just learn about the French Revolution and a lesson about French geography, you could then be offered to take a look at the Chateau de Versailles, for example.
Yeah.
And since you've learned about the Chateau de Versailles, you could learn about neoclassicism and architecture.
Yeah.
And the system could automatically get you through a network of knowledge that you can always relate it to something you already know.
Yeah, no, that'd be, I mean, you know, that's, you know, your levels ahead. No, but I agree with, that's, you know, especially once you have a question library and you just think about, you know, the best way to navigate. Right now it's just a curriculum. You can say, I want to learn about, you know, the French Revolution. But this will kind of, can organically, what you're suggesting, could, and there's no reason why, you know, I haven't built it and it's going to, but it can be built today. And it's kind of silly that it's not being built, especially, you know, considering how leverageable something like that is.
Have you thought about teaching parents, educators, teachers on how to teach, how to communicate effectively to your audience, how to troubleshoot where the hang-ups, the gaps are?
So I don't know if the question, have I ever thought about teaching to educators or parents how to communicate? So there's an interesting story there too. Like this was when Khan Academy was like, you know, I was like happy if anyone called me and thought it was legitimate. And so there's like literally 3 years ago, Miami-Dade contacted me, said, can we use your videos for teacher training? And I was like, yeah, sure, that's awesome. That's like, wow, like y'all are like real educators and y'all want to use my videos. And I was like, but why don't you let the students use them too? No, we're not ready for that. That's like, so you know, one of there's a guy, you know, there is a reality now where you should have. Well, yeah, I think there would be value in maybe, look, telling teachers, like, look, you don't have to be perfect, just be human and just be conversational and don't talk down and don't try to kind of use this as a kind of a power exertion type of classroom management type of thing. Use it, and I don't blame teachers because the system forces them to manage a classroom, demand respect. If they have a gap in their knowledge, you can't be honest. You know, I can see like, oh my God, you know, like I can be, but like if you do that in a classroom, then they're going to undermine. I mean, there's all these other dynamics that occur that why a teacher can't be human. But I think, you know, we're in a world where we'll probably get a subset of teachers who are scaling up, and then the rest of the teachers, leverage this to kind of become that human one-on-one mentor. And I think that'll be kind of the value. And then, you know, it'll just be kind of example. If they say, hey, let's watch this together, and then did you get it? And if you don't, then I'll be your kind of mentor to walk you through it. So I'd be happy to if anyone was interested in me, you know, doing I don't know if I know how to, but you know, well, anything like that. But yeah.
I'm curious about the peer-to-peer interactions and community and how far you've gotten, where you could be going. You've touched on a couple of things I think are just world-changing, intergenerational knowledge transfer, wisdom. You talked about one-room schoolrooms. Well, what about just the usual parent-child?
Exactly.
I mean, there's so much that could happen using this model. So where are you?
Yeah, so the peer-to-peer, that's kind of the most like, on the drawing board right now. I haven't, I've kind of tried it out with my cousins as a one-off basis, so I feel like it'll definitely work. And, the data is being set up, but, knock on whatever this is made out of. Hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll get some resources to start doing, because that's the most technically intensive peer. And we want to get to the point where not only are we doing peer-to-peer and it's seamless and it's capturing data, but it's also recording those interactions. So you need some. But once you record, then it's unlimited what you can do. And I agree with the whole teacher with the. I mean, I want a world where you can, if your parents want to take you to Europe, it's not going to compete with your school. You go on that trip to Europe, and maybe there's another one-room schoolhouse, part of the same network that you can go to and meet the kids in Paris while you're there, or you're on the plane. You can do. It shouldn't, and it's all asynchronous, and your parents are doing it too. So no, I agree with you completely. And the peer-to-peer is the hardest to do, and it's going to be kind of the one that maybe happens. But I think it'll happen in the next 5 years. But I think the potential is large.
So what's the optimal length or the range of the different modules, and how many times do you have to retape it to satisfy yourself that it's good enough?
Oh yeah, so the question is, what's the optimal length for, I'm assuming the videos, especially, and how many times do I have to retape it? So when I started off, YouTube, I mean, if you go right now, YouTube limits you to 10 minutes. If now they let me do longer videos, I'm a partner and all of that. But when you start off with 10 minutes, I was like, my first video was like 11 minutes, and they didn't let me upload it. I'm like, that's not going to do. So I paid attention to the clock, and I made my videos around 9 or 10 minutes. And that's kind of the single biggest point of feedback, that is the ideal amount of time to kind of get one concept across while being able to pay attention. I've gotten letters from people, even I talked to some people at Google who've done some user interface stuff and how long people can pay attention, and they said, yeah, it's about 10 minutes. I think that might be even what motivated YouTube to figure out the limit, but that kind of forced me to do that. But one, that's kind of a granular chunk that allows people to pay attention. It kind of turns it into one of these Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown type novels where each chapter is like 3 pages, and you're like, oh, but okay, I'm done. And you get a sense of completion as opposed to a 90-minute lecture that you can only watch 40 minutes and you feel. And then it also makes it very granular. You can really just jump in and get exactly what you need, as opposed to sitting through a 90-minute lecture and trying to find. So I found that 10 minutes is now I'm getting to a little bit. I actually know I've done a few videos now that are pushing 20 minutes, but this is my fault. I really think everything can be done in 10 minutes. And your other thing is, how many times do I do it?
Do you have to tape and retape several times to get it to where you want it, or can
in terms of length?
No,
like quality, right?
Yeah.
So how many times do I have to? So when I started, since it was for my cousins, I literally would record it and put up. I did not care. There's actually one or two videos where I'm answering telemarketer calls. I didn't care. Why re-record it? It's for Nadia. What is it? This is free. What you gonna? And that's another takeaway. People like that informality. They like that. I make mistakes. I would say one every 12 videos I make an arithmetic. Like I forget a negative number, or I forget a little negative sign, or I say 16 minus 8 is 5. I do something bizarre, and people really like that. Or I start a problem and I go down the wrong path first, and I say, oh wait, no, that's not right. I've gotten positive feedback on those things because you never see it. When you go to a class, the teacher has they have the script. They've done that problem 20 times, and they just do it perfect. Like, you're an idiot if you didn't see the obvious steps. But when you see someone who kind of knows what they're doing, they follow their intuition in one direction. It was wrong. That's okay. That's the art of mathematics, of solving a problem. And then you go down a completely another path. So I tried. Now that it's getting more notoriety, I feel like, oh my God, so many people are going to watch this video. Let me redo it. But I find the more I think that way, I'm getting it hurts the quality of the video. I get.
Does Kaplan or any of the other paid-for online services, Phoenix University maybe, do any of them view you as a competitive threat, being free?
They should. No, the question, did Kaplan or Phoenix use? I've actually spoke to the research group at Apollo Group, which is the parent company for University of Phoenix. I don't think, I think they're aware of it now. I've talked to Princeton Review about potentially, because I would like to use some of their materials and all of that. you know, I think there's in any of these groups, even textbook publishers, I've talked to a few, there's a group that's like very like, you know, insecure about everything and oh, it's rad. But there's another view that's like, look, this is out there, and then this could even empower your instruction. If I do all of the SAT problems out of your book, that hopefully you'll donate to me and I can do them, that's not going to prevent people from taking your Princeton Review course. It's going to make your time in your Princeton Review course way more productive because the kids will have done the problems, get all their questions answered by, you know, the Sal guy, and then they can have this one-on-one interaction with the, you know, the guy you're paying to teach the. So, and there are people. I've talked to Princeton Review and the Apollo group who definitely believe that, but then they have to fight the inertia of like, you know, we have this $1 billion franchise, we can't mess it up. Type of thing. So, but yeah, if once they really view me as a competitive threat, then I'll start getting security.
Hi. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to how you devise the content for your videos. Like, are you looking at textbooks and here's the order of concepts because you're not a fan of textbooks. So I'm wondering if there's a potential to reconceptualize the way knowledge is organized to begin with. Because I mean, I was lucky, I could follow textbooks very well, but you know, our natural curiosities don't follow the way we're taught. And early childhood educators have very often pointed out that you go to class 2 and you've killed many children's natural curiosity.
Exactly.
So how can you link the basics that you're teaching to the real world questions that we have, which have math in it we don't know, or have geography in it and we don't know? So
so the question is like, how do you build a curriculum? How do you decide what to cover? And you know, given that I'm not a fan, I'm not a fan of a textbook as like a primary learning source for someone who's. I do look at textbooks, you know, and that is but I don't go straight section 12.1 next lecture, section 12.2 next lecture. For me, and actually there's a textbook publisher who wanted me to do videos for their book, and they said I want you to do exactly this concept on this video. And I looked at that concept, I was like, there's no way I can get myself. It would be so boring. It would be just so mundane. It will just kill like all my credibility if I were to do a video on that. So my thing is I try to get the big picture, like I told you with like the French Revolution. Spend some time, mull over it, and then once you have the big picture, then try to take it into the nuggets that will build you the big picture. And then maybe use a textbook or something else just to make sure you're comprehensive. That the kid's going to see everything that they might face when they take an assessment. And you know, I use a ton of Wikipedia. You know, I use textbooks. I use you know, I use other open courseware sometimes but you know, a lot of stuff is hard to consume. It's you really have to be motivated to consume or even already have a foundation in it to consume a lot of these things. And so I kind of feel my value add is taking all of that and distilling it down to something, you know, useful.
In your model up there, you have a big arrow and your data model, the mappings that you're doing are all on known right answer or not. How have you thought of looking at environmental terms like respiration, blood pressure?
Oh yes.
Stress can be measured in learning by somebody blinking or how long.
Yeah, or EEG or something like that.
And of course you don't.
No, you know that should be. So the question is, you know, right now I'm just tracking when they're doing the problem, how long it's taking them, what time of day they're doing it, did they get it right or wrong, did they click the hint, all of that type of stuff. But there's this whole like, what was their blood pressure while they were doing the problem? What was, you know, where did their eyes move? What was their, you know, the cycles in their brain doing on an EEG? I think that'd be awesome. Like, and I mean, you could actually do some type of biofeedback stuff, and I mean that's a whole frontier that I think is.
The only bad thing is you don't want to hook somebody up to an EEG, but you can get like a web camera.
Oh yeah. You know, I mean something. Yeah, exactly. And I'm just surprised if it can be done. Try it out and see if it. You know, I think that'd be awesome.
There's research already in effective computing in Media Lab and Rosalind Picard. That's what one of her projects is. Oh, really?
Yeah.
She was cool. She was my advisor. And then they do sweat, you know, measurement and eye, you know, your eye dilation and things like that.
And I mean, I think the fun thing about this, what I kind of view as the Khan Academy, you know, right now it's very content focused. Everything I talked about was the videos and these modules and all of that. But where I see it going is the content is really just seeding. In order to do all this data stuff, you need the content. But once you have a critical mass of content, then the data kind of takes over, and you can start doing some really fascinating things with, you know, experiments that you couldn't have done before, and like real-time learning and getting feedback, biofeedback, and all this other. Okay, so you know, I think that'd be awesome.
In the beginning of your talk, you said the visitors to your website surpass MIT OpenCourseWare.
Yeah.
Is that true?
So this is, I'll give you all my data.
How do you feel about OpenCourseWare?
So the question, you know, how do I know that it's passing up MIT OpenCourseWare? And the second thing is, how do I feel about MIT OpenCourseWare?
Or is this an improvement?
So there's a couple things, and it's an interesting thing about why. So just on YouTube, which I think is the primary consumption area for most OpenCourseWare, it has passed up MIT, and you could, you can actually look at the cumulative upload views on a daily basis, and just measure the delta, and you can see that Khan Academy is getting about 60 or 70,000, MIT is getting about 30 to 40,000, and I think next up is Berkeley is getting like 15,000 or something like that views a day. So that's just on that. And then I don't have access to MIT's actual web logs, so you could go. There's a lot of indirect measures, but so definitely on the internet, I'm not 100% sure.
I mean, it's definitely a different audience.
Right. Yeah, and so that's the other interesting thing. There's all this OpenCourseWare. People are spending millions of dollars putting cameras in, but Khan Academy is really the only game in town on K-12, which is where all the need is. And so it's not like I'm like, oh yeah, MIT. It's they're catering to us. If we want to review, we took 1806 already. We just want to review something, or we can consume that. But that's not for a ninth grader who wants to learn how to invert a matrix. Or so for K through 12, I think that's one reason why Khan Academy, without really any, has kind of picked up, because it is directly addressing its audience. I think on top of that, the OpenCourseWare movement, which I think has been awesome, but their first time was let's put videos in classrooms. They didn't rethink the form factor. They didn't say, well, is this really the best way to learn online? We're just saying, well, we're going to show you what goes on in an MIT class, which I think is awesome.
Well, when it first came out, it was revolutionary.
No, it was. No, that was like my proudest day as an alum.
What I found was that it seemed to be dumping all this information to you.
Yeah, there's two things that it's going when you go there. One is, yes, it's hard to navigate. You don't know what to watch next, so it's not for someone who's never seen it before. There's no direct path. And the other thing is, even when I was making videos, I was doing the entropy video. I spent this whole time I want to really understand entropy. I want to watch MIT stuff. And I went through the thermodynamics lectures, and I had to sit through so much non-entropy talk to finally get to entropy. And then finally, there wasn't exactly what I wanted. So it was very hard to consume. And even when you watch the video, and I think it was an awesome thing, especially because in 2000 or 2001, every other university was doing some type of for-profit University of Phoenix-ish type of thing, and MIT said, no, it's going to be free. And so I think it's awesome, but the reality, if you watch the videos, and I probably watched, I think more than any of y'all, I watched more OpenCourseWare videos. Every now and then, the professor puts up a slide and it's like, this is a copyright issue, you cannot see with this. I'm like, oh my god, how am I going to understand? So, and it happens, I would say, 1 out of every 5 videos. It's not like or the camera is just not where it should be, or you can't see, so it's a video. I think it's awesome for other universities to see what MIT is doing, and it takes a lot of security on the part of MIT to do that, because before
it takes some confidence to just release
exactly, because otherwise
everything that you have, basically.
Because it says that there's a value of being here, and it also is look, this leaves us open, because before this, everyone would think all these secret things are happening at MIT that are super special, and we don't. But now you know exactly what's happening, and it kind of loses the super, mystique of the. No, I agree, but I've talked to OpenCourseWare, and I'm open to talking to them as much as possible. I asked them, hey, how about Khan Academy becomes your K through 12 offering, because this will help recruit kids, get them interested. I'm an alum, and we could get other, they're putting video cameras in classrooms right now. I think that we could, but hopefully that changes. I think I would love to recruit MIT other professors to do this form factor, get other students, get y'all to do whatever y'all want to do. Yeah.
How much of the success of your site do you think is related to the incompetency of teachers?
So the question is, how much of the success of the site is related to the incompetency of teachers? And this is a sensitive subject. So,
I hope you're going to be as open as
how many teachers are in the? The reality is, look, they're incompetent anybody. They're incompetent X, and unfortunately, some kids that's all they get. And I think there's a lot of that, and you'll just look at the only comments I delete from the site are when there's profane language, and even those some I don't get to. So these are unedited comments, and you'll see on pretty much every video, at least half the comments are some kid who's angry that they're paying X $1,000s of tuition to whatever, and they spent a whole semester trying to learn it, and they thought it was impossible to learn. They spent 10 minutes on some video, that's all it was, and they're angry. They're genuinely they want to kill somebody. This is so. I think that's out there, and there's a professor in Montreal wrote a blog post about this. It's just even if you say that this is above average instruction, it's better than, and we could debate, is it better than 90%, is it better than 50%? But even if it's above average instruction, even if this instruction is better than 50% of instructors, what's the point of having those 50% of instructors? I mean, it's a thought experiment that should happen. And even if I'm not the 95th percent instructor, someone is. And then you get that person, or someone's a 99th percentile instructor. And if you have that person, then why are you having the other 99 out of 100 delivering lectures? But no, there is, and a lot of, and it goes into a lot of teachers, I think, are products of the same system. They're products where they don't have the intuition and the connections, and because of that, they're kind of passing on this kind of rote, superficial understanding of things from generations.
Somehow you waved around the I really think that the teachers have a value. Like, I mean, the reason I think MIT is confident to put the curriculum on the site is because what they do is a lot more, I think, than just kind of indoctrinating you with some stuff.
Right.
Is that the magic? Is that I don't know, smoke blown in their nose or something?
Right.
Whatever, which does the magic there, right? So I think that's pretty difficult to capture. So you're doing a really excellent job covering the 80% with 20% sources, right?
Yeah.
And because of this teacher incompetency, right? But the question is, how do you take it further? For example, how do you do that, like, in special thing, like, I don't know, do you plan to incorporate find some really high top-notch teachers or something?
So I mean, the question I think is, is it just going to be me, or are there, other potential people? And and even the top-notch thing, I mean, it's not clear that MIT's instruction is better than, what you're going to get at the local high. I mean, those guys are going to be kick butt, like in terms of the research they're doing and all of that. But the instruction, and it might be ideal for an MIT student. Yeah, I mean, some of the MIT lectures, I think they're confident because they say, look how hard this class is. Or they can say, it's like but the question about other instructors, when I started this, I assumed that was going to be the case. I assumed that, I had done like 30 videos. And I was like, oh, this is fun, and people are watching it. Let me get my other buddies from MIT, they'll make some videos, and I'll see if they're interested. And some were interested, but it was harder for me to get people to do videos than for me to just do them myself. And after some point, I had like maybe, 100 or 200 videos, and I said, well, this is algebra. It's pretty much done. I said, I'm just going to keep going. But to answer your question, I'm open to it. And if someone wants to, a couple people volunteered. I said, make 50 videos. If I think those 50 videos are of the same style, even if they don't get associated with Khan Academy, they're going to have value by themselves. They're going to be on YouTube. The world can access them. But if I think they're of the same style and they're kind of coherent with this brand, I'll push traffic that way. Especially, there's a guy who just contacted me about music. He wants to do music theory. I'm like, yeah, I don't know anything about music theory, and I probably won't until you teach me about music. So I have this. So I'm open to it, but it's. I don't think it's something I can put like a job posting for to make YouTube videos. And the other thing is, a lot of very good instructors freeze up a little bit in this form factor, because it's something. I mean, you are putting yourself out there, and if you are a Nobel Prize, PhD in this, it's a lot harder when someone criticizes you than like, yeah, I'm just a guy, like but like when you're like the authority, to kind of put yourself out there in that way is sometimes a little daunting to.
I don't know if this is for you or your crack programming team, but how far away are you from having, forget the videos, at least the drilling module for, say, high school algebra 1 on a DS or an iPod Touch?
So how far is the module from a...
So having the complete drill set, all the questions, all the metrics, everything being able to load, put Junior in the back of the minivan, and do 2 problems every 15 minutes or every 5 minutes, and teach Junior Algebra 1 in the back of the minivan all year, not having to go to class.
Oh yeah, or iPad, or and Jay is he's an iPad iPhone expert. But I think it's literally. I mean, we don't have, but one developer for I don't know, 6 months devoted on that would probably be able to migrate.
Would the data fit, though? I mean, how much data would you need for that?
I think it's just a matter of syncing it and that type of thing. It would just be implementation, but I think it could easily be consumed and done on especially an iPad or something like that. There's no reason why it should be done.
You're nonprofit, right?
Yes.
And do you see yourself moving to a revenue model, and have you been approached?
Yeah, I'm surprised it took this long for like. Where is there some smoke and mirror? Like, what is it? There's no money. What's going on? No, so yeah, it's a not-for-profit 501c3, and it was interesting because about a year ago, before I quit my job, I really wanted to quit my job. It was a good job, but I wanted to do this, and and some VCs had contacted me saying, hey, we love what you're doing, and we think you're doing education right and all of this. How about we do a hybrid model? You're going to get a salary, and you can do this, but we'll have some premium content or some this or that, or And I was very close to doing that. But then, the more and more I thought about it, especially when I spoke to them, I knew that at some point our desires are going to conflict. And my worst nightmare is that all of these videos I did, all of this gets acquired by McGraw-Hill and just gets thrown in some library someplace and just disappears from the planet. That's I mean, for me, the real joy of this, even if I'm forced to drive a used Honda my entire life, is that my great-great-grandkids might be able to learn calculus from these videos. Like, that to me is the most tremendously exciting, powerful thing. So it is not for profit. It was being funded by my bank account until very recently. Actually, last week, Ann and John Doerr wrote a $100,000 check to give me a salary. so that's kind of, so I'm, you don't have to feel too much, I'll take some sandwiches, but I'm okay. And then I'm talking to some fairly large corporations now that they're like, yeah, this, I tell them, look, maybe, show me a higher social return on investment. Get $500,000 budget. We'll have three, 4 developers. We can educate millions of kids for all time. It's not like this is a charter school, and as soon as the money disappears, the school disappears. As long as someone's paying $50 a month for the web hosting, it's going to exist forever. And now it's being replicated on it's getting on all sorts of hard drives, and we're going to put it on BitTorrent and all that. So we don't even have to pay for the web hosting. So you're building a library that can continue to deliver social return. If you do any type of back of the envelope calculation, it's like $500,000 per year investment. The social return is going to be like, especially if you translate it into 5 languages, it's like $2 billion a year. If you associate a video view with $1, I mean, it's ridiculous. So, and I think people are seeing that. So hopefully we'll get some.
But you are going to sell out.
I am not going to sell out. At least, well, there might be a movie one day. No, hopefully I won't sell it. But yeah.
So to follow on that a little bit, I mean, you've told us a number of ways that education is entrenched in unproductive ways.
Right.
Is this interesting in the way that Wikipedia is interesting, or is this interesting in ways that can end up transforming education as it exists today? Because this could be good supplemental material that's there forever as you envision.
Right.
But that doesn't, Wikipedia doesn't change the way
I'll repeat it.
education is.
Yeah, so the question is this, is this going to be, do I envision this just being like, what Wikipedia is, which is a tremendous impact, but kind of a supplemental, nice to have for the world, or is this something that could transform education? And I think in the short term it's the former, but in the long term, and for me long term is 10 years, I think it really is. So, a big part of this, I view this as the operating system or the DNA for a physical school. And I am starting, I actually do a little summer camp, really for me to experiment with what do you do with the rest of the school day? Because I view you do this for 2 hours, and then it frees time the rest of the time to do creative things, to actually write computer programs, compose music, paint, instead of to actually build things. So my goal is to kind of, that summer camp's going to get longer and longer and longer. Get some space. And actually the San Jose Tech Museum is going to give us some space. We're going to start having a presence there. And so that physical experiment is going to get more and more substantial. And at some point we're going to be like, we're a real school now, and this is the prototype. And and I don't want to do it if it's only like a 5% better outcomes than what's being. I want kids. Like, yeah, I just wrote I just painted that picture, I just built that robot, and by the way, I'm 12 and I'm learning calculus. Like, I want to see that. And I think when you have one example of that, but I think in the Bay Area you can do many, they're not a kid. But then I think, as you set the example, and I think the rest of the world's going to be like, wait, even our $40,000 a year fancy private school is not doing that, and they're charging $5,000 a student, as opposed to.
So then the next question becomes, if you do that, this seems to apply to self-selecting students who seek out the materials, and even in the case of the camp, there's obviously going to be some selection there. So how applicable are the ideas then to going to a school where you have everyone?
Right, so the idea is, this is right now applicable to a self-selecting pool of students, and even the summer camp I'm doing, and that's true. And how do you apply it to a broader audience? So I think there's two. One, like the summer camp that I showed the data with, that is, the selection criteria was not, kids with a certain IQ or kids who've done, that was just kind of non-problem kids. So this was mainly minority kids from East Palo Alto, Redwood City, Menlo Park, who were they didn't have discipline problems. But I think that actually describes like 80% of students. That's not, that's probably 90% of students. And I'd say probably the subset that have discipline problems, a lot of it is because they're not being addressed in this way, that they have these gaps and no one can address it. And there's all sorts of social stigmas. I mean, it's ridiculous that like concepts and age are associated in this tightly linked way, that if you're 13 and you need help with decimals, you're stupid and I'm going to make fun of you type of, it's this, and I think that leads to a lot of social acting out and all of that. So actually one person I want to get this into prisons because they have a lot of time. So I don't know the exact answer. It's going to be some experimentation, but I suspect that this is going to appeal to a larger swath of, because it's interactive. Everything about it, you're never having to sit passively. You're learning the way people naturally want to learn. I think a lot of these, hyperactive kids or whatever, they're like natural learners. They just don't like being lectured to. They like to be interactive and talk to their peers and whatnot. So we'll see where that goes. But it's an interesting, it's an interesting question. If there is something that can really accelerate 90% of the students, but it leaves behind 10%, is that a good or a bad thing? And that's a whole social debate that one could have. Yeah.
In case there is a movie made about you, can the other Salman Khan play this Salman Khan?
Oh, yeah. So he says, can the other Salman... So for those who've never done a web search for Salman Khan, I encourage you to do so when you go home, because there's an Indian actor with my name. I think that's helped me beat MIT Cooper courseware as well.
One issue you might have thought about, I've watched a second grader in the neighborhood who is homeschooled, and I'm afraid he's really missing out on the socialization factor.
Right.
So, if we transition more to this method of teaching, how will we not lose that?
Right. So the question is the socialization factor, and I want to be very clear. It's on the internet essentially, and someone could be sitting in an isolated room and doing this on not having any socialization. But the goal when I described the one room schoolhouse is that it actually is social. Like for the first time, you actually do get socialization in a school. You don't need, most of us, there's 1,000 kids in the schoolhouse, but you don't get any interaction, especially in a meaty way, except in recess and lunch. But now this is actually encouraging socialization in the classroom where you're tutoring each other. That's actually very good socialization. And we want to, if you think about when do you want to give someone a big thumbs up? You could, right now the system says, oh, you're a genius. You got an 800 on your SAT. That's where you get the thumbs up. But the real thumbs up is you're a good teacher. You have empathy. You have maturity. When other kids respect you for your ability to communicate and not talk down to them. And so if you think about what people will kind of get points for, I want it to be that the data and the assessments show that you're a great teacher to your peers. And if you're an employer or a university, those are the kids you want to admit. Not the kid who's just just racing ahead and just arrogant and all of that. So I think it'll actually help socialization, especially with the one room model. Good. Yeah. Cool. I'll finish. Oh yeah.
When are you speaking at TED?
Oh, so the question is, when am I speaking at TED? I don't know. They actually, I just had but I don't know. I don't want to. If they call me, I'll go. I mean, I'm not very good. I'll be speaking at PopTech. Have you all heard of PopTech? It's this thing in New Hampshire. It's like a mini TED.
I'll speak at TEDx if they call.
I'll speak at anywhere. I speak at the local high school. Sandwiches. Cool. Excellent. Well, thank you. Great.